Hello and welcome to Inside the Birds TV. Geoff Mosher, Adam Caplan, ITB TV, of course, is powered by DraftKings, the number one rated sportsbook app. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app right now and start playing their online casino games. And when you do, make sure you use promo code ITB to get your bonuses. All right, as promised, Adam, we did a fantasy football preview in our last ITB, I think a week or two ago, and we really focused on the quarterback Carson Wentz, emerging running back Miles Sanders. We covered their fantasy value and how they compared both not just as Eagles, but to the rest of the league. And today we're going to go into wide receivers, tight ends, and we'll get a little bit into the Eagles defense for this show. Before we start, I think we talk about the Eagles in a context of a remade offense, right? So I think you and I are on the same page in that the key term is if healthy, this should be a pretty good offense. I mean, maybe one that reminds people of what it was like a few years ago when they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, the only difference is they don't have a dynamic running back like Miles Sanders. I mean, they made the trade for J.H.I. He was more of a grinding type running back. They had LeGarrette Blount. They just didn't have anyone like this guy, and he's a special football player. So they're going to have that. But when you say like there are going to be some differences, the big thing is speed. And that was what they had to get. It was extremely difficult, as you and I talked about last year, to watch this team each and every week. It was like they were running in mud. They were so slow, and now they got tremendous speed now. The question is, can they get these guys on the field? Well, Reagor's going to play. He's expected to start. The question is, will he be ready? They've got John Hightower, Watkins. They've got Greg Ward. So Geoff, I agree. You're right. This has a chance to be a really fantastic offense. I think top 5 NFL offense here if the key players stay relatively healthy.
Well, if you remember 2017, Adam, the one thing you would say about their offense, not only was it explosive and it was the top 5 offense, it was a very balanced offense. Not one running back or one wide receiver went over 1,000 yards. And only, I think, 4 times that whole year did someone have a 100-yard either rushing or receiving game. And you look at this team, and we'll start with wide receivers. And now we start to see, again, if healthy, a good balance here. DeSean Jackson comes back. Jalen Reagor, as you just mentioned, they've added. We'll get into him. Hopefully you see the Eagles see the progression they want to see in J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Of course, what we saw from Greg Ward. And they brought in a few rookies too. But let's focus on Jalen Reagor. I think he's someone who's got some tantalizing upside. The lack of OTAs may hurt him a little bit. Now, your buddy John Hansen, who runs the website fantasypoints.com, has him ranked 39th among all wide receivers so far, which is more of a projection than normal because Jalen's never set foot on a football field. What kind of neighborhood? I've compared Jalen's situation and his body type and the speed and everything to Jeremy Maclin, who had a very successful rookie year. What do you think about Jalen Reagor? Is there a comp that comes to your mind or a number that comes to your mind?
It would be he. I actually thought about that a couple weeks ago, but the difference is that the Eagles are going to move Reagor a lot. They're going to move him around for matchup purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Maclin was moved a little bit, but the fact of the matter is, actually, Maclin played a lot of slot in college at Missouri. Reagor's faster, and they're going to take advantage of his speed. Now, some people think that Jackson and Reagor are somewhat of duplication. Not really. Yeah, they both could run, but DeSean's a specific type of receiver.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to see a lot of possession routes with him. Reagor is going to be used on everything, short, intermediate, and deep. And that's really the difference there. And with Reagor, he's basically, for this season, he's a number 3 fantasy receiver with a lot of upside. You're drafting really more in a keeper or dynasty league, where a keeper league you're keeping maybe 4 to 5 players. In a dynasty league, I'm in a dynasty league for fantasypoints.com, and he went in the 6th round. Now that's early.
Wow.
But remember, Geoff, that's for the future. You're not really drafting as much for this year as you are for the future.
Right.
Now he's probably going to go, probably anywhere from rounds 8 to 11 if you were going to draft now. And he's basically a low-end starter, high-end backup, so that's generally that area.
Another guy I like to look at, not just Jeremy Maclin because of the similar situation, but also Deebo Samuel last year, because Deebo came into a team that had some pretty decent weapons, but more so a great coaching staff and a great offensive scheme. And Debo is the type of guy who they were able to figure out how to get the ball in his hands in more than one way. He had 57 catches at him for 802 yards, and he had an additional 14 rushes for 159 yards for a total of 961 yards and 6 touchdowns. And I almost look at that and I wonder, more than wonder, I feel like that's fair, for what we think that they're going to do with Jalen from getting a ball in his hands in a creative way standpoint. I wonder if that's a fair barometer, except for the fact that he won't have as many OTAs and camps, obviously.
Yeah, and now speaking of what you just said about not having OTAs, so I talked to an executive who was with an NFL team in 2011, and he said that the difference, first of all, he said, don't forget that the rookies did not have the playbook. They weren't allowed to have it. So they were kind of swimming. Training camp was a disaster in terms of guys learning on the run because they didn't have access to the playbook, where this year, at least you have it. So that's going to help you. But he said the level of play was not very good in the preseason. He said his recollection 9 years ago was that around week 3, 4, and 5, the level of play really took off. So yeah, barring a surprise, we're not going to have any offseason weeks. Even by the end of June, it's still going to be very difficult to get players cleared to practice by then. But at least they have the playbook. They're having the Skype sessions now with Reagor. And I think you outlined a couple shows ago for our listeners, actually on our pod version, that you had heard that Reagor is going through a lot of coaching, right, Geoff? What did you tell our people?
The point was that they have plans to get the ball in his hands more than just the traditional line up at the X receiver and run routes. They want to play him at X. They want to play him in the slot because they feel like they can capitalize on his space across the middle of the field. And they want to be able to use him creatively. So I'm going to go and put some editorial license in there, and knowing how Doug likes to do with wide receivers, as he did with Nelson Aguilar a few years ago, he likes to get them the ball in their hands on counters and jet sweeps and things of that nature. So it wouldn't surprise me. That's why I kind of mentioned Debo having 14 rushes for 159 yards. It wouldn't shock me at all if Jalen was able to get the ball in his hands 15 to 20 times as a running back.
So if you watch his highlights on YouTube, right? Wait till you see the way that they use him this past season. Get a bunch of gadget plays, all sorts of different plays. Really, really cool, Geoff. I love the way that they used him in that offense. They'll use him as a slot on slot screens, stuff like that. So to me, that's pretty exciting. I agree with you. Although Reagor's faster than Deebo Samuel. No offense to Deebo Samuel, but the reason why the Niners drafted Ayuk is they wanted someone who could run a little bit better than Deebo. Deebo's a terrific football player. But Reagor's a guy that you want to get the ball in his hands and watch him go. And plus, he's a special teams returner as well. I love Reagor if you're in a keeper dynasty league as a number 2 receiver for the future with a lot of upside. And with Doug Peterson, who I've deemed as a top 5 NFL play caller, I can't wait to see the way that they use him. He's a special talent. The one issue that he has, and it's legitimate. One team told me they graded him for 7 drops last season.
Right.
That has got to be better. And they're almost all the same. Short area, trying to get upfield before you secure the football. He's got to be better with that. But if you let the player go to you in fantasy, you're going to get some upside in the second half of your draft.
So what kind of numbers are we looking at? 50 to 60 catches, you think?
I've got him for 60, 870, 14 and a half yards per catch, and 6 touchdowns. Now, I didn't do the rushing stuff that you had. So if you throw in, what do you think he can get per carry?
Well, his speed, let's see, Debo averaged, what did he average per carry? Yards per attempt was 11 yards per carry.
I was going to say 10 to 12. Good. Yeah. Okay.
No, 14 carries, 159 yards. So he was over 10. So if you put the ball in
12
Jalen's
to 13
hands,
then.
Yeah, 20 times, right? Maybe you can get an additional 250 yards. Is probably not unfair.
Yeah, so that gives you extra value. And obviously if he scores, you really get value. And by the way, he should return this year. It's not set in stone, but if you look at they're not going to ask DeSean to do it. Barring a surprise. Last year, I was told he was open to doing it, but obviously it didn't even matter because he was hurt. He only played really in 1 game. But Greg Ward could return punts. I mean, when you really look at it, you don't want Miles Sanders returning kicks.
No, you don't want
you
that
don't
anymore.
want him doing that, right?
Right.
And Boston Scott could do it, but the best one to me, and he is scintillating. Oh my God, watch Reagor on punt returns. This is all, by the way, on YouTube, folks. You could see every single return. In fact, there's a highlight package that's 8 to 10 minutes. It shows like just about every catch and his returns. He's really exciting with the ball in his hands, and particularly in space.
Well, you mentioned DeSean, and by the way, I'll just throw my 2 cents in there. I feel like Jalen's probably good for something in the 750-yard range if he stays healthy and if he has a role in the offense, and probably an additional 150 to 200 yards. Yeah. Okay. Well, I know he'll be involved in the offense. It's the health that I always worry about.
Right. But he could literally, based on what you were saying with the rushing yardage, he could have combined yardage 1,000 yards, which would be a terrific rookie season. Sure. But the Eagles, look, the issue here is that they don't have anyone else. Alshon, we have no idea when he's going to be ready. Could they go to Marquise Goodwin? He's sort of an insurance policy. They needed to have a veteran to at least be on the team. Marquise Goodwin's almost a lock to make it. They need a veteran, and he could run. And it's a track meet, folks. This is the first. This, if they all play, will be the fastest offense the Eagles have ever had. I mean, this is.
Oh my God!
I mean,
at least under Doug. Yeah.
No, but if you go back to DeSean and Macklin,
I don't know. We got that's good because you got Shady, Macklin, and DeSean.
Ready for this? Okay. You got Sanders,
right?
Reagor, D-Jax, Marquise Goodwin, and John Hightower if he makes it. All track guys. They're all track guys.
To open it up to 4 or 5, then you might get a point.
That's right. That's what I said. If they all make it, if they all play, right? Sure.
Right.
Because last year, watching Deontay Burnett, Marcus Green, Robert Davis, that was painful.
Yes, it was.
And that wasn't lost on their front office. I'll leave it at that.
So let's go to the other veteran on this, DeSean Jackson, who, I mean, my gosh, he played 1 game last year. Actually, I mean, the stats say he played 3. But
technically, he only really played 1.
He only played 1, and he had 2 touchdowns of over 50 yards. He averaged more than 17 yards per catch. Now, granted, that was 1 game against a bad Washington team, but now you put him on a team. Yeah. I mean, I really wonder what kind of season he could have had last year.
How many games? All right. How many games does he play?
I'm going to say 13 for DeSean.
That's what I got. That's exactly what I got. It's so funny. Yeah, because I looked at I went through his numbers and I looked at the probability because he turns 34 in December. Although I know that he's taken his fitness extremely serious. He's got his trainer, Gary, who does a tremendous job. Look, we know last year, folks, he should have had the muscle core surgery by Dr. Myers. He should have had it. I don't know why he didn't have it. He rehabbed it on his own with obviously the club supervision. Didn't work. He came back for that Chicago game. It was funny because the coverage in the Chicago game, Geoff, when he was out there, they played so deep, the safeties. That's the other thing.
Oh man, yeah.
That's why Carson Wentz could have his best season somewhere around 35 touchdowns or so. If Jackson, as you say, and I agree with it, could play 13 games, I've got him for 50, 875, which is 17 and a half yards per catch with 5 touchdowns. It's funny. I've got him playing 13 games as you do, and he already had 2 touchdowns in 1 game last season, so he maybe has 7 or 8, but he's not a guy you can use a lot in the red zone because you got those 2 great tight ends.
Now, if you have him playing just 13 games but having 875 yards, you're basically saying he's on a 16-game, a season pace to have over 1,000 yards.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. I mean, he hasn't had over 1,000 yards since 2016. No, he's done it 5 now that I look at it.
What's that?
But not since 2016.
Yeah, he hasn't done it since and it was with Tampa, or is it with Washington?
No, with Washington. His last year, he had 1,005. So he's done it 5 times in his career, but yeah, that was the last time.
It's been a while.
But he did average 19 yards a catch 2 years ago when he played 12 games for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, I mean, he led the NFL with that. So he's still got, at least he still had it then, and he still had it in 1 game last year. I think the bigger question for me is how many touchdowns do you think he's going to score playing with a guy like Carson who likes to drive the ball deeply?
Yeah, actually, he only started 16 games twice. 08 his first year and 13. And that year, for Chip Kelly was a monster. I mean, he was great in Chip's offense. It's a shame it never worked.
Right. And then they cut him right after.
yeah. Well, that was bad when he was looking. They were trying to find him after the Saints game.
Yeah.
I just feel like this is a situation. If by a miracle he plays 16 games, I mean, but what he can do for Carson, and as Zach Ertz told me last year, is for him particularly, because underneath, and obviously it includes Goedert, because their two tight ends are going to play relatively the same area. You have to make a choice. If Reagor turns out to be who they think he is, at least flashes in year one, you can't expect him to be a stud year one. But Geoff, if Jackson plays almost all the games, Reagor scratches the surface, he has what we would call a good rookie season, plus those two tight ends, and Sanders is as special as they think he's going to be. How in the world do you defend this team?
I don't know. And I'm sure Carson Wentz is thinking the same exact thing with all that added weaponry. I like your numbers there, 50 for 875, 5 touchdowns. It wouldn't shock me if he had more than 5 touchdowns, but fewer than 875 and 50. If he just became like one of those deep threats that, he helps you go up by a touchdown or two because he catches 2 really long balls, and then, you call it a day and try to preserve him.
Well, I could tell you that in that Washington game last year, my sense is, Geoff, that he tweaked his groin. He never spoke about it, but I don't think it's possible, because the Atlanta week he practiced.
Right.
And then if you remember, in warmups
on the field and
warmups. Yeah, and then Goedert pulled his calf. He re-injured it because he had the calf injury very early in training camp. But I could see 6 or 7 if he plays 16. But I'll tell you what, fantasypoints.com has him at the 58th receiver. Okay, here's the way you draft him. He's not going to get the earliest to go would be like the 10th round for Eagle homers. But if he's going to help you some weeks. He's going to have a game where he goes against an awful beat defense that they have slow corners. The one thing that some of the Eagles coaches have told me over the years about Peterson, in 17, they were incredibly matchup based. Each week they said, okay, what are we going to do against this team? What can we take advantage of? And it was a group effort between their assistant coaches. It has not been quite to that degree the past 2 seasons, 18 and 19, as much as they would like. Well, it's going to be this year with all the collaboration. So this is going to be matchup based. DeSean's going to have 4 or 5 games where you go, oh my God, did you see what he did today? Like the Washington game. Just so for fantasy purposes, let him come to you. No one's going to want him because of his injury history and people have forgotten about him. The only way, Geoff, and this happens in fantasy in mid to late August, is if he's healthy and having a great camp, there's going to be some hype with him because the Eagles offense is going to get hyped.
Oh, you're right about that. You're absolutely right. Interestingly, Alshon Jeffrey, you mentioned him. You draft him at all? Is he draftable? We know he's going to probably not be ready for the start of the season.
Yep.
May not even be ready until halfway through the season.
Yes. Here's why I do it.
I agree.
My last round, I do this every year. A guy that nobody wants that I've targeted that I keep my mouth shut on. I don't say much about the player. I'll probably, the year that I drafted Kurt Warner, my keeper league, is 1998. Now, the only reason why I knew about Warner is because my friend had Iowa Barnstormer tickets. My friend Don Johnson. I haven't talked to him since like 2000. I don't know.
Not since like Miami Vice.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. Yeah. But Don lived in Iowa. He was managing a Best Inns, something like that. So anyway,
nice.
he had, and it was the Saturday night game of the week on ESPN, the Arena Football League game, and I would watch, and it was number 13, and they had those goggles on the side of the helmets, i.e. Barnstormer. And I was, he's God forbid he's got to play if Trent Green gets hurt. They've got a lot of talent with Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt. I didn't know that they'd be the greatest show on turf. But what I learned about that is, Geoff, always take your last round seriously. Now, in my last round, I almost always draft my kicker. But if you're taking your kicker, you should never take your kicker if you're in a 16 round draft before round 14. But if you already have your kicker in your defense, if Jackson's there, I'm taking him. Or excuse me, Jeffrey, I'm taking him because
right.
No, but I will not take Jeffrey if I have Jackson. Probably,
it's too risky. Right.
Yeah, I don't want to have two receivers on the same team. That just doesn't work. But why not? Why not? Because he's a physical guy. This is what they need. They need a physical play on the outside, and he may have 2 or 3 good games down the stretch. Who knows?
How about Greg Ward? Do you think he's draftable? I personally don't. I'll just wait until I don't think people are going to draft him, but if the Eagles get an injury or two, I do think he becomes a priority waiver pickup, especially if he has to be the full-time slot. But I'm not going to. I mean, no offense to Greg Ward, what he did was fantastic, but kind of dime a dozen-ish as far as fantasy value.
Yeah, because their pass target group, it's going to be Ertz is 1. Number 2, it's either going to be Goedert or Reagor. You could flip-flop them as 2 and 3, and 4 is going to be DeSean in terms of pass targets, and DeSean's just not going to get a lot of catches. Now, a couple things about DeSean: tremendous hands. Coaches have worked with him. He's got soft hands. He's not a guy who commands the football in terms of targets because he's not. You're not going to keep throwing the ball and expect him to get a lot of possession catches.
I'm sorry. Let me just stop you. Are you talking about DeSean? You said DeSean.
Yeah, DeSean. I'm just saying.
Okay, I didn't know if we were back to Greg Ward or still talking about DeSean.
No. I'm with you on Greg Ward. I'm with you. I don't see, but what I'm saying is, I don't see a lot left over for Greg Ward to get. He's basically going to be their 4th or 5th passing option every week, even if he's their slot receiver.
Right.
I think the tight ends will dominate this year because, as I said earlier, I think if the Eagles have their speed on the outside, they're going to be hard to defend. I just don't see DeSean getting. When I look at his targets over the years, you're really looking at 5 to 6 targets a game. I think is pretty much it at most. I don't see a lot. I just seeing it being their designated deep threat. I not at 33, Geoff. You can't expect him to get 6 or 7 catches a game. That's even 5, which would be a lot for him. 80, he's not getting 80 catches this year. There's just no way. 50, like I have him for 50 now. As we said, if he plays 16, he's going to get well over that. But getting back to Greg Ward, you're right in that if they start having a lot of injuries, then his role would grow just like it did the second half last year. And he and Wentz did have good chemistry.
Yeah, absolutely. But as you're mentioning, 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, mostly in the red zone.
That's
you would think he's going to come off the field in those situations. I just don't see a lot of. I could see him being somewhat valuable, maybe as a waiver pickup in a PPR league where, if they get a lot of injuries, he can catch 5 or 6 balls a game. But he's never going to have a lot of touchdowns. That part I just don't see happening.
I agree.
All right, let's move on to the tight ends. So I have a motto and a theory in fantasy, Adam. It's like whenever a good player in football has one of the best years of his career after the 3rd year, like when he's not necessarily an ascending player anymore, but he's just an established good player, that it's very unlikely he's going to repeat that again the year after. It doesn't mean he can't be good, but I bring this to Zach Ertz because when he had the record number of receptions 2 years ago, 116 catches, and he had 1,163 yards, I knew going into last year that he's still tight end number 1, but there was very, very little chance that he was going to catch 116 balls and give you 1,000 and 1,100 yards, which he had. And last year that proved to be true. He had 88 catches, 916 yards, 6 touchdowns. Look, he's still tight end 1 wherever you want to, wherever you tend to take your first tight end. But I don't think, I'm not sure he's ever going to be 100 catches and 1,000 yards again.
Well, yeah, he's a top 4 tight end. It's just a matter of what your scoring is. Kittle's up there and
Kelsey.
Yeah. So, but as far as drafting Zach Ertz, I'm going to let him drop. And last year, I was not as high on him because I thought Goedert was going to have a huge role. Well, he did actually have a pretty good year considering, folks. I don't know if you're new to our show. We reported last year that he suffered a calf injury on the 1st or 2nd day of training camp. It was really not known until I think it was that Jacksonville preseason game, Geoff. I think it came out around then. It came out around then that he tweaked a calf, but that's why they signed that Ellis. Ellis worked out, and he worked out because of Goddard's calf. And then, unfortunately, he re-injured it against Atlanta in week 2. Well, actually, he didn't play. He re-injured it in warm-ups in Atlanta inside the dome. And unfortunately, he was not really, I'm told, himself until midway through the season. But he still did a good job. There's no question about it. And he's going to be a factor. He definitely plays into what Geoff said about 12 personnel. They're going to be a 12 personnel team. That means 2 tight ends and 2 receivers for most of the time. Once again, for the 3rd straight season, they're not going to change. They're just not. I don't see that. I agree with your assessment on Ertz. I have him for 85, 850, 10 yards per catch and 7 touchdowns.
Steady Eddie.
Yeah, he's not going to get a lot of yards per after the catch. Dallas Goedert, they have him at fantasypoints.com as their 14th ranked tight end, which means low end starter, high end backup. I think he's going to be better than that. I really do. I see him as a top 10 tight end. You know why? Because he's going to be good in the red zone. I've got him right now for 75, 900, and 7 touchdowns. I got him 12 yards per catch. Geoff, he was under 11, but that was because of the calf injury. Greg Cosell told me that he thinks he's a better athlete than Ertz. So I think he could actually out yardage, but not out catch Zach Ertz.
Well, one thing we should tell the people is that last year Dallas Goedert had 87 targets. That's twice as many targets as he had as a rookie when he had 44. So that's a great trajectory for one. As you mentioned, he had 58 catches, 607 yards. So I definitely think he can creep over 60 catches and approach 650 to 700 yards. But one reason I really like him, Adam, as a top 10 is that if Zach Ertz were to get injured, and he's getting a little bit older each year, he's now going to be 30 this coming season, I believe. You have him slide into that role, and I don't think Carson Wentz necessarily skips a beat. I think he would look to Dallas as much as he does to Carson right now. And I'm not trying to say they're equals. I think they're, as you mentioned, that Goddard's probably maybe a better athlete. Ertz, I think, a better route runner and just a more natural to the position. But I still think that if Goddard had to be the number 1 tight end, he's going to put up tight end number 1 numbers. Then top 5, top 6, top 7 tight end numbers.
Fair point. They have him at fantasypoints.com at 14. So they've got Gronk ahead of him. Gronk with his injury history. TJ,
okay.
Yeah, I would have Goddard over him. Well, obviously he's back with Brady. I get it. TJ Hawkinson they have over him. Hawkinson was a first-round pick of the Lions. He unfortunately got hurt last season. Mike Gesicki. There's a lot of buzz on him in fantasy.
I have not seen Stafford use the tight end a whole lot. I mean,
he's never had anybody.
And then he left, and he had Ebron who left, and everybody thought Ebron wasn't that good, and then he was
always hurt there. Yeah,
he made an impact with the Colts.
He did. He had 14 touchdowns.
So I just wonder if it's kind of a quarterback thing where he just doesn't really see the tight end as well. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, they have Gesicki over him, Cook, Evan Ingram, who's hurt a lot, Hayden Hurst. I would have him somewhere. Folks, I'm going to go on a limb here. I've Goddard over Gesicki. I think Hawkins will be a little bit better. I would have Goddard over Gronk. I would have Dallas Goedert around 11 or 12 and my friends at fantasypoints.com have him at 14. So we don't technically agree, but we're not too far off. But I think people are sleeping on Goddard, man. I think he's going to surprise people.
Well, I didn't hear a name, and maybe you said it, and it's the guy who finished with the 2nd most receiving yards at that position last year, Darren Waller. Did you name that?
Oh, I love him. Yeah, they have. Yeah, well, here's their rankings at tight end currently. They've got Kelsey, Kittle, Mark Andrews, Zach Ertz, Darren Waller, who I love, Tyler Higbee. Tyler Higbee, I have a man crush on this guy. So I had a running joke with Sean McVay because I knew about him at Western Kentucky. He was a big time athlete at the position. So I said to Sean, I was like, "Hey man, why don't you use this guy?" He's like, "Well, we have Gerald Everett, who we're going to use as our who is the kid who is as our Jordan Reed.
Oh, okay.
As a flex tight end. Sure. And Higbee they use as the Y tight end, as the inline tight end. So I got it. I understood that. And then Higbee set an NFL record for most 100-yard consecutive 100-yard games. I think it might have been 6. It was absurd what he did last season after Everett got hurt his knee, and Brandon Cooks got hurt. So he's a stud. I'm a big fan of his. But Everett's healthy now, so we'll have to see how much he's used. And look at all the ones that they have ahead of Goddard. Gronk, injury history. Everett Ingram, injury history.
Yes.
Hunter Henry, injury history.
Definitely.
So we'll see what happens. But
and new quarterback.
You agree with me,
Hunter
though.
Henry.
You like Goedert, though, right?
Yeah, I really do like Goedert. And again, I'm gonna hone in on the fact that if he has to, he's already a good tight end who can give you points. But if he moves into that tight end number one role because of an injury or anything to Zach Ertz, he's going to give you a real major uptick in points there at that position. So I like him for that.
Okay, would you draft him as your starter?
Well, I mean, it depends. Am I putting him in my top 5 tight ends?
No. But if you were going to wait for your tight end to like rounds 8 or 9, would you draft him as your starter?
I wouldn't be afraid of it.
Okay, good.
I mean, once you get past the first 5 or 6, right, you get into teams that maybe not feature their tight end as much. So he's clearly featured in as much 12 personnel as they play, and he's an ascending player. So I'm not afraid of it. No, I'm not.
I like it. I like it. Okay, cool. Good.
All right. I want to get into the Eagles defense before we finish this up, because to me, this is the biggest kind of feast or famine type of analysis we can give here for a team. I mean, you talk about having Darius Slay now and Javon Hargrave and Malik Jackson coming back. And they don't get a lot from their linebackers, but from an overall defense, they should be very good at them. But I also worry that you draft the Eagles, they get if Slay gets hurt, they're almost back to where they were 2 years ago.
Yeah, they've been a upper half of the fantasy defense, but it's been a while since they've been really worth starting every week.
Right.
For whatever reason, 17 they were good at times because they had leads and they protect them and be able to get turnovers and sacks. I think this could be a little bit similar to 17. In that this offense has a chance to be terrific, matchup based offense. And now, as you said, they add Slay. They have a true number one corner, which they have not had really since the days of Asante Samuel, of course, but he was also like Slay, not drafted by them. Of course, as we said in our last Inside the Birds podcast, we were talking about the Eagles defense, and you were reading the list of their draft picks. I mean, it's really since Lito Shepherd and Sheldon Brown, guys that they drafted, those are the last 2 really good starters that they've had. So, look, now the issue that I have, and we talked about the last show, they don't get a lot of turnovers, and now you've got some questions with new guys going to be out there. You got Jalen Mills playing a new position, Will Parks with a new football team. The corner positions, although they've got a true number one corner, is Avonte Maddox going to really hold up as a starting corner? Could Jones challenge him? This is why the Eagles are not a top 10 fantasy defense. They're a high end backup, low end starter type defense to me, at least on paper.
Yeah, I mean, you just hit it on the head. When you're talking about real life football and fantasy football, it's different for what you're looking for on defense. You'll take in real life football a bend but don't break defense that you've seen the Eagles be. In fantasy, you want a sack and turnover defense. And as good as the defensive line is, none of those guys usually get you 10 to 12 sacks. They're more of a what's the sum of the parts is better than the individual, right? Or the whole. I just butchered that one. But
we got it.
Collectively they're great. They're a very good defensive line, but there's not a JJ Watt in there who's going to get you 15 to 20 sacks. And the same thing on the back end. I mean, whether it's your coverage linebackers or anybody outside of Darius Slay, who probably is not going to get thrown at a whole lot. You just don't trust anyone to really come up with the football a whole lot. And in fact, I'll say this: Mikael Roby-Coleman for a slot, even though he's only 5'8", does a great job of getting his hands on the football. He's more of a pass breakup guy than an interception guy. But the fact that 2 of the 3 corners on the field on most occasions are going to be 5'10", 5'9", 5'8", doesn't inspire you thinking they're going to get a lot of interceptions.
Geoff, here's what you do: is you need, if you're going to draft the Eagles as your starter, you need a good backup. Only play the Eagles defense at home when the matchup says so. Don't start them on the road unless it's like against a really bad team. Because this is now I will say, though, before we get out of here, if these D tackles play as well as they think they're going to play, Javon Hargrave, Cox, obviously, and then Brandon Graham, who still hopefully has some, he played well last year. He should have something left to attack.
Yeah.
They have enough in them to force turnovers, because if you get that pushed up the middle, something they haven't had here, and obviously Malik Jackson, as you said earlier, this defense has a chance to be a tremendous front, and that's where not only you get your sacks, you force the quarterback to get rid of the football before he wants to.
Yeah, like you mentioned, fantasypoints.com has them as the 14th overall defense. I think they're going to be a little bit better than that, Adam, but I wouldn't necessarily propel them higher than 10, you know?
Yeah, that's it. That's the range, 10 to 14, folks. Let them you have to know your scoring, though. If points against are going to be a part of your scoring, the Eagles should be pretty good. They're not going to be great every week. They'll have some letdowns on the road probably. But remember, when you've got Slay will lock down. They never played man travel because they didn't have anyone who could travel with receiver. Mm-hmm. Now they can do that. So I agree with Geoff. They're 10 to 14 in that area. You wait till the end of your draft your defense. Around 14 to 16. That's pretty much it. In a keeper league, I would not keep them. Or dynasty league, I wouldn't keep them. They're not. I don't see it until the Eagles get that number 2 corner where you could depend on them each week. See, I think Maddox for the future, though, after the season, makes way more sense as their slot corner, and they draft a corner who could play on the outside. Unless by minor miracle that Sidney Jones becomes the player they thought he was going to be, which he has not shown to this point.
That's correct. All right, that's a great way to wrap it up for this edition of Inside the Birds TV. If you like what you saw, please become a subscriber to our Inside the Birds YouTube channel. I want to thank Hunter Brody, our producer. You can find his work on his YouTube channel. That's Sports Talk with Broads. Catch him on Twitter at Broads81, and catch the latest Inside the Birds podcast on any platform that you use. And also check out our work on InsideTheBirds.com. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next episode of Inside the Birds TV.